According to my screen, we're now streaming.
We are.
Okay, fine. Okay, so let's begin. Good evening, members. This is a special meeting of the Development Management and Licensing Committee. And for the benefit of any of the public who may be watching, this is a properly constituted committee of the Town Council with designated authority to comment on planning applications and planning matters. This special meeting has been convened to give members an opportunity to think about the government white paper planning for the future. And apologies for the late start, but members have just received a briefing on the white paper, which went on a little longer than had been intended, but it was appropriate and valuable to do that. So without further ado, I will call upon members to identify themselves and confirm that they can hear me, and I'll go around in the order that I can see you on the screen. Councillor Crawford.
Yes, I can hear and see you.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Yes, I can hear and see you, Chair.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I can hear and see you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Squire.
Yes, I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, Councillor Hutton.
I'm here and can see you. Thank you.
Councillor Venning. You need to unmute yourself, Councillor Venning. Wave at me if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Jolly good. Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Yes to both.
And Councillor Fay.
Yes, Chairman, I can see and hear.
Councillor Smith. Thank you. And we also have with us the Town Clerk, Mr. Carl Hearn, Assistant to the Town Clerk, Jan Smollicum, and Councillor Mandy Ewings, one of the ward members who's also joined us for this, this meeting. Please, now is the opportunity for us to go through the agenda. Jan, have we had any apologies?
No apologies received.
No apologies, thank you. Item 2, the minutes of the last meeting, to confirm that they're an accurate account of what took place. Yeah, thank you. Everyone happy that they're happy to receive the minutes? Thank you very much. And item 3, declarations of interest. If you're aware of any declarations of interest to be made now, please do so. And if you become aware of any as we go through the meeting, please make that known as soon as you can. Items for determination by the committee. Now, essentially, there is only one agenda item for this meeting. And as I said earlier, we have received a briefing on the government white paper, Planning for the Future. Members have had an opportunity to look at various documents and paperwork relating to this. We're very aware that the Devon Association of Local Councils is submitting a very detailed response submission. And there doesn't seem to be a great deal of point reinventing the wheel and repeating what DALC will be saying in a much more detailed way than we can. So the suggestion is that if we want to make a submission, we focus it on issues that we feel particularly relate to the parish of Tavistock. And I think that should be our guiding principle. And at that point, it's over to you. If you wish to speak, please wave at me, or Mandy, shout at me or something, and we'll go see what people have got to say. I might, with your agreement, call on Graham first, just to give us a lead on areas he feels we need to discuss. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I think for the benefit of people listening in, I focused on 9 areas of the 25 questions in the briefing, and I think those probably are the areas of most relevance to Tavistock, with the addition of question 4, which says, what are the top 3 priorities for planning in your local area? Which I think is a question that Tavistock Town Council can properly answer. But the issues that I think we need to would be able to take a view on are usefully are the local plan, the 3-zone system that's being proposed, the idea of permission in principle, which caused some questions at the briefing, and clearly there is an interest in that. The government's commitment to neighbourhood planning. I think the issues about development management and whether they should be national or not is probably, we would find that we were in line with DALC in any event. The housing development requirements, I'm in your hands about that, because I think that, again, I think that the issues there are big ones about the algorithm that's being proposed. But it does raise issues about whether we, as a town council, would like a seat at the table that's at the local table that says where development should be located generally in the area. The shift to digital planning, I detected from the nodding and the just general interest and alertness in the briefing, that there is something to be said about that. And I would be surprised if we didn't have something to say, given the debate we had about climate change, about sustainable development. So those, I think, are probably the areas that we, as a town council, would be able to say things that would add to what our representative organisations have already said. Okay,
thank you. So I guess, members, the first decision we have to make is whether we wish to make any representations at all. Is it your wish that we do so? Councillor Ellis, were you trying to say something a moment ago? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just would like to thank Councillor Parker for his hard work, and I just wanted to reaffirm what you brought out right at the start of the meeting, and sort of I propose that Councillor Parker just gives us sort of 4 or 5 bullet points of what he thinks is going to have the most effect on Tavistock, and then that we sort of put those to the vote now, because I think we've had his very thorough notes, which were excellently put together. We've just had an hour's briefing. One member wasn't at that briefing. I think further discussion is just going to draw this process out on an important subject, but it's a subject that, you know, Councillor Parker knows after 50 years in the trade, and those of us that have had the notes and been to the brief, you know, I mean, I'm speaking personally here, but I'm sure everyone else will admit that they're still pretty clueless as to the contents of the white paper. So if he can surmise for us the 4 or 5 most important points for Tavistock, we vote on it and we put that forward as our response to the consultation.
In that case, just give me a couple of seconds to.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that, James.
So while Graham is composing his thoughts, Anne.
I need to say that while, first of all, to thank Councillor Parker for all the work he has put into it, because I know it's an enormous piece of work and it's a massive subject.
Yeah.
If he doesn't come up with the 4, if somebody's got a suggestion that they want to raise that aren't in his top 4, then they should have the ability to do so. I mean, I've got a couple of things. If they're not in the top 4, I firmly believe that I should have the ability to raise them here this evening.
For sure.
Yeah.
Does anybody else?
Okay. My own view is that the 4 that I think that would make a difference to us, that will out of the white paper, is the issue about digital planning. Now that's tied up with the nature of Tavistock, the accessibility to high quality broadband, because I mean I think we should understand the high download speeds that are needed to deal with these interactive maps and the kind of stuff that will be coming up. So I think that's one issue. Second issue, particularly given the way, and I'm absolutely certain that other parishes feel the same, but given the way that the Section 106 process has let this town down, I think we should have something to say about switching over to a more level playing field levy system. I think we should have something to say about neighbourhood planning and the mixed messages that are coming out of government. On the one hand, as I've said, committing themselves to neighbourhood planning and giving neighbourhood plans more force and potentially more authority, particularly in the field of design and urban design. But on the other hand, passing secondary legislation like the Use Classes Order and the General Permitted Development Order that kind of cut neighbourhood plans off at the knee. And I know that a number of councils in Delk who've started neighbourhood plans are feeling that themselves. And then the fourth thing, just thinking back to Ursula's points, Councillor Mann's points about the permission in principle and the capacity. I mean, it's a good idea. I'll put my cards on the table. I think it's a good idea, but I recognise that there is a capacity problem in local authorities and in the public, to get involved in that process of local planning. If in 30 months they're to deliver permissions in principle. So those are the four areas that I think are probably most relevant, James: digital, Section 106, neighbourhood planning, and consultation.
Okay, thank you. Anne, what would you like to add to the list?
No, digital was very much at the top of my list, so thank you for that. And I think and Section 106 as well, so that's good. Thank you.
Okay, so that covers the issues you wish to raise specifically. Leslie?
Yes, I'm going to look at I was looking at the three priorities at the top of Pillar 1, and I think that we perhaps should think about the affordability of housing and looking at, sorry, what have I just put down? So that we should have more affordable housing, which covers building homes for younger people and even people that are homeless, and perhaps social housing. Improving the infrastructure, I completely agree with, and the environment and biodiversity should be taken into account as well on all these proposals. I'm less concerned particularly about the digital thing, because in some ways it does, not that I'm not concerned about that, but in some ways it feels like quite a lot of the decisions will have already been made because of the local plans. It's the way that I'm reading this, and maybe I'm reading this wrongly. It seems to me that everything is going to be outlined in the local plans. So I don't know quite what the objection is going to be. I mean, yes, I would like to see them remaining on lampposts and things, but it just feels in some ways as if these big, especially these big developments, those decisions will have been made way before we ever get around to getting them into action, really. So I'd just like to see more affordable housing and an improved infrastructure as well, as I say, and that takes into account the environment. Thank you.
So this is in response to question 4 then, Leslie?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, because you can't do any of those things unless you're getting some funding in. Okay. So should we adopt that as a structure then for a discussion now, and then try and come up with whatever feedback we wish to provide? Does that sound reasonable? Yep. Okay. Thank you. So the first issue that came up then was that of digital, moving on to a digital platform for planning matters, right from submission of an application, right through drawing together of a local plan, availability of that local plan to applicants and to the public. Concerns, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, is that being a rural area, not everybody enjoys a good quality internet connection. We even have problems within the town, as is evidenced with our own meetings on Zoom from time to time. We have a population that is right shifted, that is to say, older than the average demographic. And although, to my great pleasure, an enormous number of older people, certainly within the U3A, have got their heads around the new technology, inevitably there are plenty who haven't, or don't have the means to engage with it. So there is a risk that a significant number of our townsfolk could be denied access to this process for want of satisfactory digital resources. Is that the sort of thing we're thinking about? Graham?
Definitely, yeah.
Could I add one to that? And it's one that I didn't draw out particularly, but it's the nature of the developments in Tavistock. It's all very well the government's focusing on large-scale, significant sites and significant developments to boost the 300,000 houses a year. But actually, the vast majority, 99-point-something% of the applications in this town are trees and garage extensions and single house plots that don't make the headlines. And the only way that neighbours really stand a chance, unless, as I say, you're a nerd, absolutely scanning the lists every week, the only way you stand a chance of finding out that something is being proposed is the sign on the lamppost.
Yeah.
And it's the nature, and that's to do with the nature of the development in Tavistock. That's really nothing to do with broadband. It's just that people do not go looking for planning applications, but the lamppost tells you it's there.
Yes. So the planning application, the notice of the planning application has to come to you rather than you going to it.
Yeah. Essentially. Yeah, and that could be done digitally, but not with the general what's the word, data protection regulations. You couldn't use for example, the information on the electoral roll as the basis for emailing everybody out.
Yeah. Anne?
I think if everything was to go digital, I think it would exclude quite a lot of people in Tavistock, and it would let a lot of applications slip through without proper scrutiny and without people who have got a right and should have the ability to look at it. So I think we've got to be very careful. So I very much support us using this point.
Okay, please. Pete?
Oh, I support the comments of our previous councillors very strongly on the grounds that digital communication is quite acceptable. It must not remove the traditional means of communication. I think the issue of public participation and consultation is crucial in terms of planning, and one which we need to enhance and improve our work with, and that task requires traditional methods of communication, and indeed probably even more of that, i.e. literal communication between councillors and the public about planning on a literal basis. I would concur with our previous comments that we need to retain that.
Nice one.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this heading then? Can we weave that into some sort of statement? I notice note-taking going on massively by our officers. All gone very quiet.
Would it be appropriate, Chair, to delegate, say, the chair, the vice chair, and the mayor to approve on our behalf a statement that they might be able to put together with the benefit of the town clerk afterwards, rather than try and put a statement together by committee this evening. I think we're agreed on the issues.
That's very kind of you to put your thumb up, Peter. Yes, I think, well, I don't know if as long as my colleagues
I think that's a good idea.
go along with that.
Mr. Chairman, the town clerk's looking to speak, please.
Thank you, Carl.
I think it's important, if the committee wants to follow that approach, that it gives a very clear instruction as to the specific areas, and you've already covered those to some degree, and the specific direction in relation to those areas and the points you wish to be raised. I think there's a difference between working up something which is clearly led by the deliberations of the committee and working up something which may not have potentially been discussed by the committee. So I would suggest that in relation to each of the points that have been raised, the committee indicates the particular areas. So if we take the issue about digitisation, Councillor Johnson raised the point about exclusion and about the potential that certain parts of our demographic and our society would actually be unable to access services. I think you need to do that in relation to each of those areas in order that then something can be worked up. But if you don't do that, the danger is that we're not actually reflecting the views of this committee in terms of what is important and what isn't important for the residents of Tavistock.
Very well.
Unfortunately, myself, I do have to leave the meeting shortly, but it's not a reason why we can't do that. What the delegation would be to your officers in consultation with, but based upon the responses to the specific points that you wish to raise, if that's agreeable to you as a membership, and that enables you to know that you're representing the views of committee and council. Thank you.
Okay, so if we take digital planning, then the issues I've written down, firstly, in relation to the nature of Tavistock and the types of planning applications that are predominant, being small developments of one sort or another, or alterations, or tree applications, where if there isn't a notice on a lamppost, it's not going to get attention in the local media and people won't know that an application has been submitted. Therefore, introduction of a digital platform does not take away the need for a notice on a lamppost or gate or whatever it is. 2, the availability of high quality broadband. That the internet accessibility in the town is patchy. It's not always of high quality. There are real difficulties in accessing high bandwidth applications of one sort and another, and digital interactive policies, maps, etc., would be a problem for many, particularly in the more rural areas. 3, the awareness, I've done that, the awareness of applications. Yes, the demographic, the fact that Tavistock does have an older demographic, and there will be a significant proportion of our townsfolk who are not comfortable with IT and are likely to be excluded from the planning process by virtue of that. Does that summarise what we've said? Graham?
While I was listening there, I realised that the tone of it is actually quite negative. But I've always listened to James and about the way in which planning misses the younger end of our population. And there's an interesting, I think it's in the white paper, an interesting passage where the government run a pilot, and the responses digitally were very much towards the younger end. So the opportunity, I think, to introduce, particularly in local planning, the future of the town, the future of the area, to our younger people digitally and through schools or whatever, I think it's an opportunity that we ought to say that we recognise and would welcome. I think that puts a bit more balance, but at the same time caveating that places like Tavistock do have the issues that that you've read out, Chair, which I agree with wholeheartedly.
Okay.
So
So, I
would
mean,
you agree with that, James? I know this is one of your kind of crusades, which I'm quite impressed with.
do you want to comment on that, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should just make the short statement that we welcome the digital era and the modernisation of planning applications. However, we don't want to lose the old school note on a lamppost.
Yeah, so we need the two systems to run side by side to begin with, at least.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I take the point, Graham. We don't want it to sound as though we're Luddites. Yeah, because I mean, the digital platform will come in eventually, that's for sure. It's or whatever succeeds digital in due course. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
Mandy.
I have to say that I agree that we really do need to keep the notices on lampposts or whatever. For some people, it's really imperative because of accessibility, etc. And the digitalization just hasn't got to them yet. And I think for a few more years, it should be kept going. And respect that, I don't think they really use the term silver surfers anymore, because so many older people now do have access and do use the system. There are still quite a few that don't, and we shouldn't be making it difficult for them to access the planning system. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep, thank you. So have we covered off that point then? Yes, I think we have. So the second one then was the issue of switching to a standardized infrastructure levy, recognizing that certainly for this town, the Section 106 arrangements have not really served very well. What points do you wish to make about this? James?
I think that Section 106 is ridiculous, and we've seen that from our brief last night as well. I think if we are going to have a levy, then parish councils, town councils, their voice must be listened to and be put in as part of the levy and not just ignored at borough council level.
Presumably there are two issues, aren't there? There's the actual raising of the levy, and then there's how it's spent. If it's a standardized system, then presumably central government will determine how much per house, whatever the levy is. But it's what happens to the money then, isn't it? That's we really need to have a say in. We need to be part of that decision making.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the way it works with the community infrastructure levy at the moment is that the priorities are set out in the local plan. There is a separate development plan document that sets the rate of the levy, but that's applied back to the priorities of the local plan. But the additional twist is that those parishes and towns that have got a neighbourhood plan also get a chunk of that levy to apply to their own priorities. Under the new one, all it says is that the money would be allocated to the local planning authority, so that stays the same. This is not a proposal to take the money to central government, who would hand it out like business rates. And the indication is that still neighbourhood planning authorities would get that preferential treatment. But there's also an indication that the priorities have to be set for spending the money in the local plan, which is why I suggested in the notes, and Dalk agreed, that there has to be at least a local area, if not it can't be a parish by parish, but a general recognition that the infrastructure needs of some areas are higher than others. So it may be that the rate has to be set higher in some regions or urban areas or whatever than in others. So somehow getting that local influence into what that rate is important. And then the question of where it's spent is one really for the local plan to set out in the infrastructure plan. And I'm sorry, I realised, Leslie, that you had your hand up and I talked over you.
So, okay, so there are two parts to that then. One is that local authorities, hopefully local councils, should have some involvement in determining what the levy is, recognising the particular needs of that geographical patch. And they should have some involvement in determining how the monies raised are actually used. Is that correct? So there are two parts to it. Leslie?
Yes, I completely agree with everything that's just been said. And we do need to look at how that's revamped. One of the things that concerned me, and it's part of what happens now as well, is in Graham's excellent briefing paper, and I can't find it at the moment where it says, but it still refers to the fact that this levy is only paid on major developments. It's not paid on smaller developments. And I don't understand why that is, because they're still going to be using services. And the worry would be that you end up with lots of quite small developments rather than the bigger ones. I can't say I welcome the particularly huge ones, but shouldn't all of these be paying, all the houses that are built have a levy paid on them?
I think that's an interesting point. And if we refer it specifically to Tavistock's situation, as we've just said, the great majority of the planning applications that we see are for a single house, maybe a couple of houses. Very few of them are for large-scale developments. And we're probably not going to see any large-scale developments, any further large-scale developments for a while. So I think that is a point that's worth making and can be related specifically to the town. I think, Anne, you wanted to say something.
I'm sorry. Sorry, who?
Thank you. Yes, mine was along the lines of Leslie's as well. I mean, could we suggest that there was a limit of maybe anything over 2 properties that there was a infrastructure levy on?
Why have a limit at all? Why have a threshold at all?
Can I just point something out, Chair? Because we've got that issue where in one section of that pillar 3, it does, as Leslie and Anne say, raise the issue of a threshold below which it won't be charged. And in another section, we're being asked the question, do you agree that the scope of the reformed infrastructure levy should capture changes of use through permitted development rights? Well, I mean, you can't have a threshold and then say at the same time that, well, we're going to capture PD rights. The only thing that makes any sense is your approach, Chair. Why have a limit at all? You know, so in the community infrastructure levy, if you want to build a garage, you pay a small chunk of the community infrastructure levy. If you want to build a single house, you're, as Leslie said, you're still using infrastructure. You're using the roads. You will be using the schools. It may only be a small amount, but those small amounts in a town like Tavistock add up. So I'm totally with you. I think we should press for no threshold at all, and yes, let's capture PD rights.
Okay. Is there anything else, Anne?
Sorry, that would certainly be much more successful than the current Section 106 is, when we've got to build 400 houses when the education money kicks in. Yeah, I would certainly agree with that.
I mean, that is, words fail me when I've gone through all of those Section 106 agreements to find out that we've only got a quarter of the money needed to build a school. the Section 106 process has failed. It's failed us badly, but we're not the only ones.
Okay. Then the next issue was the problem with the government giving contradictory messages regarding neighbourhood development plans. On the one hand, promoting them, maybe offering additional funding for their development, and then on the other hand, bringing in the change of use and the changes in the permitted development rights, which undermine neighbourhood plans that have either been developed or are emerging currently. How do we wish to approach that? Pete?
Well, first of all, I think we should literally point it out that it is a contradiction in the process and one which has a detrimental effect upon a local development area. So being specific about what we see as the conflict of interest would be crucial, I think, in our feedback.
Okay, anybody else? Graham, do you want to give a steer?
Yes, I agree with Pete. We start out by pointing out the mixed message and the contradictions, and regret that. I mean, it's a poor bit of drafting, and it's a poor thought process. But the changes to the use classes order are universal. There are no limits to it, and I don't know how, for example, one would collect the thinking on how one would collect the infrastructure levy from a change of use that wasn't development in the first place. You wouldn't know that it had happened. So that applies to everything. But the PD rights are not universal. They don't apply in conservation areas. They don't apply to listed buildings, and they don't apply to World Heritage sites. So a fair chunk of Tavistock is not affected by those. But for example, most of Whitchurch Road, the whole of Down Road, all of the estates up the hill, they will be affected. And those of some of the entrance roads to Tavistock could be, to a World Heritage town, could be severely compromised. I think I say in one of the notes that good urban design doesn't depend on good architecture. Just ordinary architecture, ordinary buildings, ordinary building groupings can produce the most superb spaces. But then you start allowing changes in skyline, changes in roof line, the odd two-story extension in the middle of a terrace. The way to square that circle may be to reward those who are doing neighbourhood planning by saying that as part of your design code, you can have a local exception to those PD rights. Now that would be, I think, an acceptable way out, and it would give the government a way to step down without losing face, because it squares with their commitment to neighbourhood plans. Cheers, Leslie.
Bye, Leslie. Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Any other comments along those lines? No? Okay, fine. Thanks. So the next one is permission in principle. And the subpoints were capacity issues in the local authority to manage this, and public involvement. And I've heard this said in other parishes. People tend not to get involved in the drawing up of local plans. They only start to get involved when a planning application comes in on their back doorstep that they don't like. So you get a NIMBY reaction, but it's very difficult to get a proactive involvement at the plan, at the drafting the plan in the first place. And it's not just here. I mean, I've heard that from a number of people at the DALC meeting I went to recently.
That was the subject of my dissertation at college, and one of the lines that you learn very quickly in planning is that people don't worry about development until it's at the end of their street or next door.
Yep.
I mean, the Plymouth Road example is a perfect example. We did, as part of the local plan, everything that the regulations said we should in terms of publicising, consulting, and still the vast majority of people in this town didn't know about it. Now, that's not their fault. That is our fault. Those of us who are involved in the local plan. So if we're going to raise the level of major sites in local plans to the equivalent of a planning permission, then it makes it even more important that somehow we get that message out, that we engage with people, and putting it on a website doesn't do it. We have to find a way of engaging with people and explaining, right at the beginning, these are the likely sites that are coming forward. These are the likely numbers. This is the likely impact, and keep that debate going. I mean, I've freely admit with the joint local plan, I think we got lazy in terms of putting everything. That's not what digital communication means, putting things on a website and hoping somebody notices it.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what
I think the thing that just struck me as you said it was that what is proposed is raising a site allocation to the level of an outline planning permission.
That's it.
It's creating a completely different animal.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
so it's more important than ever that people, let's say, who live in Green Lane, if that area gets
allocated,
appears on a plan, that they need to realise that it's not something in the abstract. They now have next to them a bunch of fields that have got outline planning permission for development.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. And my guts tell me, so I think it's a step forward in terms of planning. I mean, I just feel that it's the right kind of thing to be doing. My guts also tell me that there are some things in this white paper that are non-negotiable. And since this one clearly comes from the development industry, and I know that it also came from the senior barrister that was on the panel that guided the white paper, Chris Katkowski. This one is going to stay in the proposals right the way through to the Act. Right. So what we need to do is to try and influence the way in which people engage with the planning process.
Yeah.
Rather than try and stop the proposal.
Tony?
I totally agree with what you just said, but it also links in point number one, that if we use traditional methods of media, i.e. the newspaper, well, as soon as we know when spots have been highlighted for future development, and then give the opportunity for them to digitally get involved and get onto our website and make their comments.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an interesting that just linking the two together. That was a good point, Tony, because what the government is doing is, yes, one of the proposals is a funded pilot project on digitizing neighborhood planning. Now, what better place to pilot that than a World Heritage Site? And looking at ways of integrating digital, traditional ways of communicating It's just a thought. Because wherever the pilot study, money follows.
Okay, perhaps we should have another discussion about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one for a response to the white paper, but it's just planting an idea.
Yeah, sure. Any other issues over permission in principle?
Well, the capacity issue, I think, is the one that I absolutely agree with Ursula, that the idea that because you are not going to be doing some things, you're going to create capacity in the staff to be able to do an environmental impact assessment for 20 sites across West Devon. That is fantasy. I know what efforts are required to do an environmental impact assessment, and it's serious. Local authorities will not be able to handle it. It has to be paid for by the developer. And given if the developer has reason to believe that their site is likely to be allocated, and there's got to be a trick in there somehow, then they will spend that money.
Yeah.
If the prize is an allocation in a local plan, which is the equivalent of an outline permission, they will spend it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then Leslie raised the issue of affordable housing, but I think that fits into the infrastructure levy, doesn't it?
It does, and I recall there is a question about affordable. Let me just, if you look at question 24, oh God, no, we can't get into that. Should affordable housing be secured as an in-kind payment towards the infrastructure levy, or as a right to purchase at discounted rates for local authorities? I mean, who knows? I've read a couple of background papers on that, and I still don't understand the issues. But I think that if it means that we have to have two, that may be where the threshold comes in. Just thinking back, Anne, I mean, we've for a few years now, what the government have said is that below 10 or below 5 in some areas, you don't have to provide on-site affordable housing. In fact, you don't have to provide affordable housing at all.
Yeah.
If we take that threshold idea and say, for example, above a certain threshold, say 15, actually, if we say 10, then that's a major application, you have to provide on-site, but below that threshold, your contribution comes through the consolidated infrastructure levy, then everybody picks up, every site will pick up one way or another on affordable housing. And I mean, I've long been a fan of the idea that collecting the affordable housing money as money rather than on site. If you do that, then the local authority itself should be allowed to construct the housing, construct and operate the housing. I think that's one of the worst things that happened was the inability of local authorities to run their own housing stock. So that there may, I mean, I see one or two nods going around. There may be something in that linking the infrastructure levy and affordable housing to what I know is Leslie's point, which is about local authorities being able to run their own housing programs. The good old days.
Okay, so what I scribbled down here, and I think we probably put it into the point 2 standardized infrastructure levy.
That's wise.
That consideration be given to an affordable housing policy whereby a development comprising 10 or more properties should provide affordable housing on site, whereas developments comprising fewer than 10 houses should make a financial contribution to the provision of affordable and or social housing run by local authorities.
Yes, but through the infrastructure levy.
Via the okay. In contribution via infrastructure levy.
Yeah, but if it's national, then everybody knows that everybody will get caught. But if it's of a certain site, it's on a size, it's on site. If it's not that size, it's through the infrastructure levy, and that's easy to implement and to police.
Okay.
Hey, that's a great idea.
Well, that's covered all four of the headlines.
Sorry,
James.
Chair. Yeah, I've just got a quick point about affordable housing, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
Is it something we're actually a point we're able to make? Because if something winds me up, then it's calling affordable housing affordable. I mean, the latest affordable housing at Butchers Park Hill is a 200k house, which is a 2-bedroom coach house for £200,000, which is completely unaffordable for any local workers in this town.
Yep.
You know, when you look at the average wage for West Devon, it's less than 20k a year. So if we're going to have affordable housing, we need affordable housing reflected on the local average wage, and set it at something. The house price is no more than 4.5 times the local average wage, which is the same as a mortgage, really, the same sort of deals you get with a mortgage. Therefore, our local people can actually get on the housing ladder and have, you know, the safety and security of owning their own home, rather than these horrific affordable housing schemes that actually just prey on low earners. And although they own a part of their house, they're just making money off low earners that can't afford to buy a whole house themselves. Sorry, that's my rant of the day.
No, that's fine. Yeah, rant away. I just looked to Graham just to whether he can guide us on that.
Well, I mean, we're here at a new white paper. What did Boris Johnson call it? The most radical reform in planning since World War II. For goodness sake, I agree with James. At the moment, we can't do that under the current planning regulations. But if we're going to change those and turn them up, then yes, let's do it. Let us try and find a way in which we can regulate the price of a certain number of houses in perpetuity. I mean, it's not beyond the wit of. Yeah, it can be done. Let's make the point. I agree. Otherwise, all we're doing is accepting the constraints of the current system.
So we're talking about affordable housing, where the price is regulated in perpetuity to reflect local income, local incomes.
Actually, there is a question that we didn't get involved in. Affordable housing. No, I've lost it. It must have been, it's somewhere in there, but oh, there we go. Yeah, it says question 8A. Do you agree that a standard method for establishing housing requirements takes into account constraints be introduced? And within the text, there is a suggestion that local income levels be part of that. So yeah, we're perfectly entitled to make that point. James has picked up a good point there.
Okay. Alec?
Yeah, one of my, well, I've been challenged this all the time. Nobody ever mentions bungalows, right? Now everybody says, oh, well, it's old people's bungalows. But there are young people also are unable to walk upstairs. And nobody anywhere I can find in the country where they're going to build bungalows. You know, it's not necessarily just for old people. Young people also sometimes need bungalows. There's nothing in the paper they're saying anything about bungalows, is there?
Graham?
There is something in the Letwin review that says one of the ways of increasing the production of houses, for want of a better word, the sale of houses, the delivery of houses, is to vary the number of builders on a big site, but also to vary the house types. And the review does actually specifically mention the attraction of bungalows. So, you know, if you want to get a site shifted quicker, put bungalows on it. So, yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah, well,
it
I mean,
is.
if you put bungalows on a site, as you said, I mean, they would sell as quick as anything, wouldn't they? There's a lot of people who would prefer to live in bungalows and big 3-story houses.
But going back to James's point, bungalows have a premium of about 25% in terms of their sale price. So if you've got a house that sells for 100,000, let's say, and a bungalow with the same floor space, then that'll sell for 125. So bungalows push house prices up square foot for square foot. And bungalows are also more land hungry than houses. It stands to reason that if you get the same amount of floor space on one story that you would have got on two, then you're taking up twice as much land. Having said, so that's not part of the affordable housing argument. It is part of the argument for how do we get the delivery of housing moving faster, which is to increase the variety of the offer. And bungalows is the Oliver Letwin reviews, I'm pretty damn sure, referred to bungalows as being part of that attractive mix.
Okay, thanks very much.
Cheers, Alec.
Okay, Pete, are you thumbs up, or you want to make a point?
The word locally affordable would be a way of describing the situation which James has brought up, recognizing the income levels of local communities in relationship to the quotes of the word affordable.
I like
does
that.
need to be pointed out, yeah.
Yep, thanks. I made a note of that. Okay. Right. I'd also like to suggest that in our response, we acknowledge and endorse the submission by DALC. So I can imagine this starting off with us saying something like Tavistock Town Council acknowledges and endorses the submission made by the Devon Association, etc. And in addition, makes the following points, which are particularly pertinent to our town, and then go through the items that we've been discussing.
At least one other council has done that.
Okay.
I forget which one does David Chalmers represent?
He's up north.
Bideford, or Northern.
He is definitely. Of course, he's one of your gang, isn't he? He's up north. Yeah, they've sent in an additional statement, and so that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay. I think we've got until the 29th to get this in, haven't we?
Next Friday.
We have, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, that's not too bad. Yeah. Right. Time's cracking on, and I, for one, haven't had any supper yet. Are there any other points that any of you would like to make?
No.
Mandy, if you're still there, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think it's been really good, and thank you for letting me join you. It's been really interesting to hear the views, especially on actually every property should pay towards roads, schools and everything, not just when you get to a certain number that's developed. I think that's where the SIL actually did work, in fairness, is that's what it did. But there's a lot of really good points been raised, and it's been a really interesting debate because everybody's joined in, everyone's had opinions. I've always said that there should be a certain number of bungalows on every development, even if it's only, if it's a couple of hundred, even if it's only 5 or 6 bungalows, bungalows are needed, and they were very fashionable when I first became a councillor in the early 2000s, and then they've gone distinctly out of fashion because it means, as Graham's rightly said, they take up more floor space. So I think it's been really good that, to address that issue as well. As Alec or Pete said, it's not just older people who need a bungalow. There's a lot of younger people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Well, unless there are any further comments, I propose that we draw the meeting to a close. And between us, we'll draft a response. And as you suggest, if you will give the Mayor, the Vice Chairman and myself delegated authority to prepare this on your behalf, Graham. You're muted, Graham.
Yeah, I move that.
I thought you might. Then we'll crack on. So I will offer to do the first draft.
Well done, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that too. And
Just keeping quiet. Well done.
and then I'll pass it round to my colleagues for their corrections, additions, subtractions, whatever. And we'll get this done in time to submit next Friday, by next Friday.
Thank
You happy with that, Jan?
It's the 29th. What's
hang on a
the
moment,
date
Jan.
today? What's the date today? Is it?
Just wait a moment, Jan.
It's the 22nd today.
Oh, so it's next Thursday, is it?
It's next Thursday.
Yeah, I
I just make
think you're right, Paul. It's the 29th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just make the point? Obviously, I'll have to send the agenda out for the 2nd of November, which is only a week on Monday, on Tuesday next week. So if I could have, so I can do my final minutes, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'm not promising to produce a draft by Monday, Jan.
No, I can do it as a to follow item.
Yeah.
But obviously, we will need it in good time so that I can send them out before the Monday.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I will do my damnedest to get this thing done. Well, it will be done for submission by close of play on Thursday at the very latest, but I'm not making any other promises beyond that. Looking at
Close of business Thursday will be fine because obviously I'm in the office then to be able to post them out.
Well, we've got to have done it by then anyway, because it's got to go, it's got to be submitted. Are we confident of the route of submission?
It'll have to be done by email.
Yeah, of course. Okay. It will be done.
Mr. Chairman, what about giving people a section each, if that makes life easier for you?
Do you know, Mandy, I'd rather just crack on and do it.
Alrighty. And nodding away.
I've written a very lengthy report this week already. Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Ewings.
That's all right.
This won't be lengthy. I don't think it needs to be lengthy.
No.
I think I'm grateful to James for his suggestion that we focus on just a few important points.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay. Therefore, unless there are any further offers, I propose that we close the meeting. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Graham sent you a message.
You sent me a message. No, you haven't.
I think Graham one just to say thank you.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Cheers all.
All right. Cheerio, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jan.